So, woo! Um, for those of you who weren't there yesterday, I'm working on a couple rounds of user research that would like to do to help support the project to grow, and in particular to identify some of the challenges that app developers experience when trying to make the transition to Buildpacks, and also some of the challenges that Buildpack authors face when maybe they don't actually want to be Buildpack authors. They're just app developers who want to add some file to their app or do something really simple, or maybe even something more complicated. But we know that Buildpack authorship is a challenge right now and with the V3 spec. Um, so, but before we kind of dive into that topic, that's sort of the second half of the brainstorm. But the first thing I'd like to just talk about is like was just like dream really big and like think very blue sky. So we have the budget to talk to 15 to 25 users to help advance the project. If we could learn absolutely anything that would help guide us in making CNBs grow and become like the dominant containerization tool, what we want to learn. So there's no wrong answers. I encourage you to go for volume. And I'll set a timer for like 5 minutes. We can brainstorm answers to this question. Please just feel free to write directly in here. And yeah, what questions do folks have before we get started? Cool. All right. Well, I set the clock to start. So start jamming. If we could learn anything that would help us in guiding, making CNBs grow, what would we want to learn? About 1 minute left. So keep pushing. Get all your thoughts out. All right, that's the timer. So this is awesome that we have so many folks here and so many ideas. The discussion might take a little bit longer than 10 minutes, but I think that's kind of more important than this good proxy for Buildpacks authors thing. So um, why don't we go around and do a popcorn style and just tell us sort of highlight your top thing that you would most like to learn out of the things that you wrote. And as we're going, I'll do some organizing. So let's start with Sophie. It's right below me.
Yeah, so the one I put up there, I forget exactly where it is, but I was wondering, like, what documents or reference do you look at when you're using Buildpacks, and what do you find helpful when you're trying to use the Buildpacks? And is there anything that could be improved to make your experience a little bit more clear?
Cool. Yeah, and if anyone has like similar things that they want to jump in and add on with, or want to ask a follow-up question, this is definitely a discussion. So Sophie, you can popcorn to someone else.
Sure. How about Josh?
Yeah, so I kind of asked some more basic questions, which was just let me see, where are they? I asked what languages do you want supported? Just to make sure that we're covering all of the cases that people actually want. And I also asked like, oh, how do you currently build your images? Just to see what their current workflow is, because I think a lot of people have like really bespoke image building like situations, and it's interesting to see like how different corporations or different like organizations like build their images. And then do developers plan on, this is kind of the same thing, but do developers build their own images for prod, or does a separate team other than developers build the images, just to kind of get more of a like a sense of like what they're currently doing, and to see like if they like that or not, stuff like that.
Yeah, what is it about those two questions that like might help inform the features for CMD lifecycle?
I guess just to make sure. I mean, that's a good question. I would just want to like make sure that we're like to see like what they like and don't like about their current process, I guess, and to see that like what we should keep out of like a current process and what we like should try to improve.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Popcorn it over.
Emily.
The one I want to bring up is probably not as important as some of these like really high level questions, like what are your problems with Buildpacks? But very specifically, I put what's your level of familiarity with OCI images and what about the Docker CLI? Because I think a lot of times when we're making decisions about what a good interface for pack is, a question comes up like, should be as similar as possible to the Docker CLI. Like, what is like, if we use these domain concepts or similar usage, would that help people because this is something they're very familiar with, or is that confusing because a lot of the target audience, like these would be new concepts that I have to learn about. So I think just getting a sense of how comfortable people are with these tools and concepts would help us make good decisions in the UX.
Awesome. Yeah, I love these super detailed ones, or the more low level ones are actually super helpful. You know, popcorn?
Yeah. Joe. Popcorn.
I think,
Joe.
thank you. I think mine would be very similar to Emily's, except I would expand it out to the cloud native ecosystem. Like I'd like to know for the typical user or what the spectrum is with of their familiarity with the broader ecosystem. Like, are these just Spring Boot developers who want to build an image and then don't care about where it runs? Or are they pretty intimately aware of how Kubernetes works and how that might interplay with the fact that you know, it's an OCI image and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, what are some other, to get a little bit more specific there, other than Kubernetes, the big one, what are some of the other things in the ecosystem you'd like to know if people are comfortable with or aware of?
Docker, generally too, like what's their comfort level with Docker? What's their comfort? And I think that's kind of what Emily was saying. Is there anything other than Kubernetes? It's just all Kubernetes. That's
Well,
definitely,
maybe.
I think, well, I mean, Kubernetes is like the, I think that would indicate a lot about the other things. I mean, we could ask about, trying to think of like Helm would probably be another good one.
Are there any specifics? I mean, Kubernetes is like has a pretty large surface area as a product or a system. Are there any particular aspects of Kubernetes that are the relevant ones in this case?
I think all of it. I think I'd be curious to know, you know, on the spectrum of I know how to use Kubernetes or deploy an app or whatever to I know how to operate Kubernetes. I'm just curious where our users fall in that spectrum by and large.
Got it. Cool. You want popcorn? You're muted.
Javier?
All right. Well, I didn't actually write it, but I was thinking about it. And mostly, I guess, it kind of ties into some of like the pre-existing pipelines that developers might have, and then how those would be migrated into or start incorporating cloud native build packs. More specifically, the thing that I have in mind is around testing, since testing is not something that, as of right now, is encompassed in cloud native build packs as a, you know, kind of very direct feature. So I am curious if anybody set up a pipeline, whether they've figured out how to do that outside of cloud native build packs, or if it's a feature that they really wish it had.
Cool. Popcorn? Javier, popcorn somebody?
Oh, sorry, I was typing. Let's go with Natalie.
Mine were about, I kind of have many, but if I had to pick one, I think just the general impression that people have, if they'd never tried Buildpacks before, what do they even think? Positive, negative?
is there a specific aspect of like, is it just like I build my app from source, or when you say using Buildpacks or using CMBs, which part of the workflow or which use case in particular?
I think we tend to make a lot of assumptions around what someone who when they learn about Buildpacks, like what their maybe objections would be to, couldn't I just use a Docker file, or that it sounds hard to customize? Or, I mean, I don't know, like we hear these things said in the wild, but like, I just like to know what comes to mind for people who just like haven't maybe tried it, but when they know what it is, what opinions they form.
Got it. Cool.
So, sorry, to tie into that, Nally, is the question really of whether or not the user at a glance really captures what the value is? Is that more or less similar to your question?
Yeah.
Cool.
So really understanding that first time experience.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Popcorn, somebody?
Let's see. Jesse?
Sure. I think someone might have mentioned part of it earlier, but my question was mostly around testing and local development. Like how do I guess developers developing apps today want to write and test their applications that are going to be containerized? I'm just more interested in experience of like, do they expect to use Docker on desktop? Do they expect to set up their local environments? Or do they want Cloud Native Buildpacks to be that full solution?
Is that also kind of gauging whether they'd be interested in pack test?
Right. Yeah. Pack test. Yep. And even like pack developer, whatever we've talked about before, where, managing kind of like a Docker Compose solution. Like, would they expect us to provide that, or expect the project to do that for them?
Sam, that's in contrast to, I think Heroku CLI has a Heroku test command that they can use to build their application and then run their tests against it, right?
Right.
Cool. Awesome. Choose someone to popcorn, just?
Sure. Let's choose Steven.
Very, very similar actually to yours. I'm interested in learning about if people feel, or for local development that's sort of very tight inner loop development where you're changing a line of source code and seeing the app update. Do people feel like their existing solutions inside of their IDEs are sufficient, and they don't want to kind of containerize their workloads as they're developing, or should Cloud Native Buildpacks invest in things like tilt and development orchestrators that keep maybe one microservice out of many continually up to date with your local source code, so you can kind of rapidly develop on something that's more complex. I think there are a lot of big unanswered questions there more generally, and it could be a place where we could provide a lot of value because we have so much control over the development process, or the build process for the containers. So like, I guess everything Jesse said, but I'm especially interested in that sort of tight inner loop, rapid update kind of aspect to it.
Awesome.
And then popcorn to McNew.
Hey everyone, I wrote what can you learn about the container ecosystem or the CMB ecosystem that might get you more interested to learn more or try CMBs? And this is somewhat related to what a lot of people talked about, but I specifically find less the feature angle, but the communication angle really interesting. And I think what I mean by that is for us to get new users to use or even investigate CMBs, they need to understand non-trivial amounts of the OCI, Docker, and even CMB ecosystem. So when we're evangelizing CMBs, we spend a lot of time explaining these concepts to users, either via blog posts, conference talks, and whatnot. So finding more like what the tipping points are, like what information about OCI images are useful, makes people curious about CMBs, can allow us to maybe be more strategic in how we communicate and document, and conference talks, blog posts, and even working groups.
Love that. Popcorn?
Yeah, I'll popcorn to Travis.
Yeah, that's great because I was thinking a lot of the same lines you were, Matthew. For me, I'm really curious about kind of the mind share, if you will, and the discovery angle of cloud native build packs. Specifically, my questions were like, how did you first hear about build packs, or CMB for that matter? Trying to gauge what sparked maybe a customer's interest to even go down the path of trying to learn more, and by accident or intentionally discover more about build packs. In addition to that, I also asked, like, where did you go to learn more? How did you go about looking for specific build packs, searching for them? Again, along the lines of the discovery angle, just trying to really gauge from a customer perspective, how would they learn more? What expectations would they might have, or behaviors in their attempt to learn more?
What do you mean by that last one?
Like, for example, one of the things I'm looking at right now is like a search dashboard for cloud native build packs to allow customers to interface, with a web-based client to do broad searches for particular build packs that they might want to use. I'm really curious, would that be valuable? I think it would be, but it'd be great to get some reassurance on just, what a customer by default go to a website and hope to find an easy way to learn more about specific build packs, to drill in more about specific topics in general, for that matter.
Cool. I know we're coming up to time here. Looks like we have one other thing on the agenda.
You can go longer if you need to.
Take another 10 minutes. Okay, great. Thank you.
I could pop.
Travis, do you want to popcorn somebody?
Yeah, I'll popcorn Terrence.
Yeah, so I had a lot of similar thoughts to what Matt and Travis had said. I mean, even along those lines of for discovery, like what do they do currently for their current, if they're an app developer, their current language and ecosystem? Because I feel like you tend to follow similar patterns across like how you do development. For how do you find the tools and things you like when you're in your language or ecosystem of choice, like for those things. I think that fits in line with that. And again, like when you learned about build packs, what caused you to want to learn more? Like what was kind of that tipping point? And then kind of the other one for me was, how do you, like, are there parts of, if you were using build packs from kind of the V2 era, like, are there features or things from that time period that when you kind of moved over that are hurdles or things you're missing?
Cool. Awesome. Popcorn to somebody else?
I guess who else is left? Kashyap?
Let's see, one second. I think folks raised like a lot more important ones. The specific topic in my mind is kind of like Terrence said, how many people have used last gen build packs in the past, Heroku, Cloud Foundry, just trying to get a sense of like what kind of percent of our current user base is coming from like some level of experience in the past. But yeah.
What percent of our user base is coming from a place of experience? Like what kind of experience? Experience with what?
Like build pack knowledge in the past. So from say V2 Heroku build pack usage or V2 Cloud Foundry usage, things like that.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Is there anybody else we can get to? Yael?
Hi, I think that people mostly said, I mean, already talked about my thoughts, so I don't have anything special to add. I mean, I'm very curious about the first time experience. I mean, how people learn about build packs, what do they do in order to learn, what is missing for them, all of this stuff. But I guess you already wrote about it.
Okay, awesome. I think we might have one or two more people still. Forrest? Forrest here?
I don't know that I have anything to add to the stuff that's already been said, so.
Okay, cool. Does anybody, after sort of what's been shared, have any other like additional ideas or things that this sparks for them that they just want to get out there?
One random question.
Yep.
One random question I had was whether a more interactive social media presence, i.e. Twitter or something of the sort, I don't think we want to make a TikTok, would help the project or not, or is it something that they're like, no, wouldn't really interact with us at all?
Okay. It sounds like there's sort of like a instinct there about that might be a entry point for people. Is that right?
Yeah, just kind of hanging out on tech Twitter. Seems like there are some organizations that post more or less, and I just wonder whether people who would, potential pack or potential build packs users whether that would be a factor for them or not.
Maybe a good way to ask that would be like, how do you learn about new products you want to try? See how often they mention things like Twitter.
Yeah.
Cool. Were you about to say something before, Emily?
I had one extra one I threw on the end here, which is which of these statements most closely match your attitude towards the container build process? It should just work. I don't care how, or I want to understand each step of the process. Because I know we have users on both ends of the spectrum, but I'm curious like where the average user or person who's considering using the tool lies.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm sensing the potential for a survey here in addition to interviews based on some of the stuff we want to learn. So this is great.
Yeah, I guess on top of that kind of stuff, I'm interested in like where people are using build packs. Like, are they using a platform? Is it just Pack? Are they using like Digital App Ocean, Tanzu, etc.?
Cool.
And I mean, I don't know how we would gather this, but I feel like some people use platforms that use build packs, and I feel like they might not even be aware that they're using build packs to some extent. I don't know again how we would find that answer, but that's very interesting to me.
I think a lot of the Heroku customers don't know they're using build packs by design.
I don't know if we would just gather a list of all the platforms that we know use build packs and say, like, have a checklist. Are you using these, right? And see if they check it off.
Cool. Awesome. We have 4 minutes left. So thank you for your patience. One of the things I'm pretty confident that we want to learn about is the build pack authorship process. because we need people to be able to write new build packs as easily as they add a file to a Docker image, but we know that's not the case today. And at the same time, it may be kind of it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem where it's hard to learn about people writing build packs because there's not a lot of people writing build packs. And so it's hard to make it easier to write them. So who might be a good proxy for build pack authors, or sort of more generally people who have to customize or alter existing build packs to get a build going? So we can do a shorter brainstorm here, let's say like 3 minutes. And yeah, please jam out your ideas. Who do we feel like would be a representative person to talk to about this? Okay, great. Looks like we're slowing down a little bit here. These are a lot of good ideas. Cool. This one is not, we don't really need to discuss this. This is sort of relatively straightforward. The last thing I want to say is, so over the course of January and February, there's going to be a lot of interviews to be done. So for folks who are interested in joining those interviews, we'll probably have space for like one interviewer, one note taker, and one like ride along, do nothing, but probably no more than that per interview. All the interviews will be recorded if people want to check them out later, and obviously they'll be summarized, and maybe even like key tidbits of the videos will be brought together into like a sizzle reel montage kind of a thing. But is anybody interested in being an interviewer, being a note taker, or potentially just shadowing? Please write your name here at the bottom, and I will get in contact with you when the time comes. Just throw your name in below one of these three. Cool. While folks are doing that, that's all for me. So thank you all so much for your time and participation. This was awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you want to take it away, Jesse?
Sure. Yeah, I put this on the agenda just to kind of have maybe a quick high level discussion. But yeah, so to level set, we've got build packs that contribute processes, but there's no way for subsequent build packs to view or alter those processes except for just pure overriding them. And I guess I'd like to explore how we think we could solve that in build packs, either by giving downstream build packs the ability to just change the existing launch entries so that they can modify them however they need to, or being able to reference them in some way so that you can delete them or extend them. I think one of the canonical examples would be something like if you were to create a build pack for Foreman or something like that, right? And there's a bunch of processes that exist before other build packs, and you kind of want to like cat them together, or you want your proc file to be executed by Foreman sort of manager or something that manages multiple processes that run in a single container, or something that ships logs out somewhere that doesn't need to have intimate knowledge of like the build packs that actually were the default process before.
I've thought a lot about like how we could achieve outcomes that allow these kind of interactions between build packs and other processes contributed by other build packs. And I think a hard part is that anytime you're talking about something trying to modify some complicated shell invocation that something else contributed, it gets pretty hairy, right? Like you really can't make any assumptions about what that string that got contributed by the other build pack was. Can you put and something at the end of it, or is there something about the invocation that will cause that to mean something different, right? Like, is it so one idea I've been thinking about is if in a later process you could reference an earlier process using a command, where the whole previous process the string isn't exposed, but the execution of it is wrapped in a function or in a script or something like that, right? But it's probably not how we'd implement it. So that when you imagine a build pack contributes something called web, and you write a web bash script to the path, right, that has the contents of that shell invocation in it, so that later when you call web, it cleanly wraps all that up and is referenceable in a later one. That's the best thing I've been able to think of so far.
We kind of already do that with launcher, right? Sort of like the we've already sort of made a tiny step towards making this easier, because you can reference launcher with a particular process type to kind of wrap some of the nastiness of trying to combine things, right?
Exactly. It seems like this is a logical extension of that, right?
Yeah, I still think there might be room for build packs knowing about those processes and being able to explicitly control them after the fact. Like right now, you've got Riff as an example, and right now it contributes 3 different processes, and it contributes a default process, but I really want to remove those other 2 processes. Like I really only want one as the application developer. So not as like a build pack author, but like I don't want anyone running a process that isn't going to do what they think it's going to do. Like I know it's fine for Riff to add those processes, but
do you want to check for the existence of other processes by name, or do you want to be able to list all of the processes from your process? Like, is it, because I think there's a big difference in how the interface is exposed if you just want to be able to say delete web3, right, versus okay, what are the processes that build packs have contributed so far, and then let me iterate through those and do something.
I have another use case that might play into that question as well. So for OpenFAS, I brought it up where I wanted to add a build pack at the very end where it would look for the default process and then essentially augment that default process. And in this case, the solution you're talking about, Stephen, which is now available where I could just reference web or whatever it may be, would work, but I still don't have the knowledge of what processes there are altogether on the build pack side of things, and which one would be calculated currently as the default at that point in time, right? So if I had those two pieces of information, then I could, construct a more reliant build pack.
Right. You want to override the default, but you need to know which one's currently default at the time of creation, so that you can wrap it appropriately with some sort of middleware or whatever, some sort of proxy.
I mean, maybe this is a crazy idea, but what is the danger of exposing the processes between build packs? If the last one always wins, right? For overriding anyways.
I guess what do you mean by expose?
Well, like, so if I want to say solve Jesse's case, right? Of like, a riff build pack runs for me and I know it produces some number of processes, but I only care about one of them or something. But I may not know which one is, except maybe it's a default one. If I'm given basically that TOML input of like what process at that point when my build pack runs is like what is being set for launch.
I think that there's two things for me. One is if you're gonna, I don't want to expose the command itself from the previous build packs, like the actual, shell invocation that they said this corresponds to this process, because I think it can encourage somebody to try to wrap it, right? Like I've seen places where that information is exposed and other systems get used in unintended ways, if that makes sense. But if you just mean the names of the processes so that you could reference them and like delete them or wrap them or things like that, I'm not opposed to that if we need it, if that makes sense. But it does add complexity, right? So now start commands have to loop other, well, I guess build packs can do that processing. If we don't need it, it might be good to start without it, if that makes sense. But if we do need it, then I'm not opposed to it, I think.
But there's not like an inherent danger or anything that I'm missing, right?
Just to exposing the names.
Yeah. I guess name and properties, because I feel like knowing which is the default is actually pretty important besides the names, right?
Yeah. Just the contents is the only thing I care about holding back. I worry a little bit about creating tightly coupled interfaces, if that makes sense, where if you can expose all of them, then you can, do things that depend a lot more on very specific combinations of earlier build packs. I don't think there's not like a critical problem in a particular use case with it. It just, if we don't need it, it seems safer design wise, like as build pack authors are creating, things that are supposed to interact with, or build packs are supposed to interact with other build packs, to avoid exposing it, but it's not a strong opinion. It's just a worry.
Yeah, I guess I feel like build plan already feels tightly coupled. And that's like you already need to know the names for provide and require, like the exact name at that point. So like there already is some coupling, whether it's like it came from the same company or like, it's basically like each set of build packs had to agree what that string was, right?
I think the idea behind build plan is that it puts all of the places where that coupling exists into a single place, right? Which is like everything should interact through this particular contract of arbitrary name strings. And it does introduce coupling when you have very specific interdependencies, but it's in one place that where we can eventually standardize on those names. The more places we introduce that type of coupling, kind of like, that's why I have the concern, if that makes sense. Whereas you could use the build plan in order to communicate about those process types through that one generic interface and not have to deal with multiple generic interfaces, if that makes sense. but yeah, it's like, I think an alternative to exposing the process types between the build packs at all is using the build plan to communicate information about the process types.
Yeah, I think I would ask for something very similar to that, right? Because I think if we talk about, whether or not this feature is needed, like when I brought up that use case for OpenFast, right? Like that was needed, but it wasn't, I had to work around it in a very like non-conventional way just because we didn't have this available. And if we talk about like some of the questions that we just asked during that like user research thing was like, hey, how do we improve this building of build packs better? And I feel like this is a very common use case now that Jesse's bringing up something relatively similar, that we probably are missing this feature from controlling processes in a better way.
Yeah, I guess some of the stuff there I'm thinking about of like, can we move this into the build plan? Is that communications happens during detect, right? Is what you're referencing, Stephen?
The communication well, detect is like kind of declarative, right? So the communication itself doesn't happen during detect, but you
Right, but like the code that
define
would
the
execute
channels.
for it would happen during detect, right?
Yeah, or the code that would let a build pack say, I plan to contribute this process type, for instance, but then it, detect is when the channels are defined, and then build is when the channels are used, right? If that makes sense, or the information is sent.
All right. Well, I don't mean to try to solve it here, but I just wanted to make sure there wasn't like big pushback on like some sort of interface to reference other processes so that you could wrap them. And so I'll probably loop Javier in and others as well to kind of start an RFC, and I'll get that going in the next week or two.
Really excited to see that.
Cool. Well, that's the last thing on the agenda, I believe.
I think this is it. Process modification from other build packs is the last thing. Oh yeah, sorry, I thought you said what's the last thing. All right. Thanks, everybody.